So I'm starting out with my React template, React router template, and I want to add some functionality to it. So one thing that I have going on here is I've got a few tests that I've set up. I'm just using Mocha, and I'm using Chai, and I'm using super tests. So if I go npm run, I could see that I have an npm run test dev. And if I do this, I'm going to see a lot of data here because I see all my SQL, and I've got a couple of really simplistic tests that are happening here. Just some routes that I'm testing. One of the things that I'm doing, and I found this to be helpful, is that I'm actually passing back some data when I seed, and I've got just 3 users, and I've got 3 products, and I'm just grabbing them back here, and I'm even testing them so I could see that I could use them. And I'm making a call for the home page. I'm also making a call for my API get products. And the thing that I want to do here is I want to do a describe where I want to actually have the idea of a user having many products and a product belong to many users. And we're going to do this is very similar to a line item. And let's actually start setting this up. And we'll do a little bit of test-driven development. So let's assume that one of the things that we can do is we're going to describe API users, and I'm just going to say user ID, and these are going to be called things. So a combination of a product and a user, we're going to call this a thing as opposed to calling it a user product, and we'll also say that if a user adds that product multiple times, we won't end up creating a new record. We'll have some quantity on that thing. So let's actually start setting this up. And what we'll do here is that let's go over here to our DB page. There's something that I had put in here that I'm going to have to get rid of. I was running into some issues here with seeding data. If I run into that issue, I will investigate it a little bit, but I'm going to probably have to take this out. What I want to do here is I want to say thing, constant define thing, and the only thing that I'm going to, pardon the pun, the only thing that I'm going to need here is going to be a quantity. This would be, again, similar to a line item. So quantity is going to be a type, and this is going to be connection.sequelize, and this is going to be an integer. And let me give it a default value of 0. Okay, and we'll specify that a user, start this way. A thing belongs to both a product and a thing belongs to a user. And since we want to go the other direction too, we'll say that a user has many things. And if we wanted to actually go from product to things, we could do that relationship as well. We don't really need it yet. And if I go back over here, I'm going to make sure that I export that out. Now, let's see. I think that this is actually going to... Well, yeah, so the problem here, and I don't know what the issue is, and I've run into it a couple of times, is that it seems like I have a constraint on the user table that was... giving errors when I'm testing, and I think that's probably a timing issue. I'm not sure what it is, so I'm going to take this out, and let's see if I can get my test to pass, which it looks like they are, and let's go in and start writing out some functionality. So what do we expect here in our route spec? Let's say that we're going to say this is going to returns the user's products. So what do we expect, first of all? That if we go over here and we do a GET request, and we'll say users, and let's use my backticks here, and we're going to say, and I have mo up here as a variable, so I'm going to use mo and say mo ID things. And what I really expect is that there's no data that's in the database for mo's things at this point. So it's going to say, first of all, let's go over here and say, well, it's looking for a 200 already. But if we go over here, it'll tell us that we really have a 404, can't end up finding that route. So let's put that route in and see what that route is going to look like. This is a pretty simplistic route to do. So I'm going to actually cheat a little bit. Let's do this. Again, we should probably set these up in separate files. This is not a great practice. But I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say users, user ID, things. And what do we really want to do here? Well, we want to find all the things that belong to that user. So I'm going to say models.thing, find all. And what do we want to find? We're going to do a where clause, and we're going to say where the user ID of each of these things is going to be request params user ID. And this is going to give me a collection of things. And if we go back over here, we'll end up getting back things. And let's see if that ends up passing our test. So it is actually getting the right number, right? It's saying that, we're saying that we're expect to have 3 back. So if we go back over here, and we go back over here, we really expect to have 0 back. And let's take a look. Now, I've been getting this constraint error, and I'm not sure why. And what I've been doing is when I just go to rerun it, and again, I don't know, it feels sort of like a timing issue. I can see that that error ends up going away. I'll have to figure that out. But what I want to do here is actually I'm going to do a bunch of different things here at the same time. So it gives me the user's products. It's actually be more specific. It gives me the user's things. So what this means is that I should also have, and one of the things you could do here is you could actually chain these things. So I actually can also do a return and say app.post. And I'm going to go over here. In fact, let's just go over here and say, well, we'll keep this here. I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to take this URL, and I'm going to do a post to it. And the way that you end up posting is that we can end up sending some data. And I'm going to send where my product ID is equal to foo ID. I'm going to give Mo a foo. And let's see what'll end up happening here. So we're chaining these things. I'm doing a post. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a then. I get a result. And my first thing I'll do is I'm going to say I expect my result.status to equal 200. Now, this route doesn't exist, so that's not going to quite work. But notice also that I do have my foo up here, which I've gotten with my seeded data. So that makes life a little bit easier for me. I can end up, accessing it down here inside the test. So not only am I going to be getting this data, but I expect that I could do a post, which I'm not going to be able to do. And again, I'm going to get a 404. So let's look and see what that post ends up looking like. So let's go to our route. And I'm going to go over here. And again, I'm going to just cheat a little bit, save a little bit of time. I'm going to do a post. Now here I'm actually sending my data in the body. And so here, just to sort of get the ball rolling here, I'm going to say models.thing. And I'll go over here and I'm going to do a create. And what am I going to create? Well, I'm going to have a user ID, request params.user ID. Now again, if I was concerned about the token or that this was the user that was using the application, I could send my token and that sort of thing. But again, I'm not necessarily worried about security right now. And I'm going to use the params from user ID, but I'm going to use the product ID, and this I'm getting from the body. Request.body.product ID. Again, my idea is to really have a nice RESTful route over here. This is just going to give me back one thing. And if I end up getting my 200 back here, that's going to end up passing as well. Again, I'm doing it within one test, which is not the greatest thing. Let's go over here. And let's start to get a little bit more complicated. So now, in fact, when I end up doing this, what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to nest again. Excuse me, I don't know why I did that. Let me go all the way down here on the bottom. I'm going to do another nesting right over here. In which case, when I end up doing this, I'm going to do a then, and I'm going to have my result again. And what do I expect here? Well, now I should have one thing that the user has. So this is going to fail, but I should see if I did end up inserting a thing for Mo, that I should be able to get that thing, and this should not be 0, it should be 1, and let's just see what happens here. Okay, and if I go back here and I put in 1, and that'll work as well. Now, the thing that I want to test out is if I do another post here, like this, so I'm nesting again. It's perfectly legitimate. I'm doing a bunch of requests here. Here, if I do this, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to end up posting here, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I go down here, and this is going to work. This is going to give me 200. This is going to work. So I'm posting. I'm doing another post here. And after I end up doing this post, I'm going to do another expect here. Now, again, like a line, the same way that a line item would work is that I expect if I end up adding the same thing again, that'll actually add it to the same item. So if I end up testing this out, I really expect this to have a length of 1, okay? But what's going to happen is that if you look at my route is just going in there and just creating a new thing. So I have 2 here. If I did 2 here, that would pass, but that's not what I want my functionality to be. Again, I want it to operate like a line item. Same product, see if you could find it, and add it to it. So how do we get this to pass? Let's go over here to our routes. And we're just going to modify this. Instead of creating it, I'm going to say models.thing find 1. Okay, not finding by ID, but just find 1. Well, what do you want to find? I want to find where this condition is true. So if in fact I do find this thing, and then I'll do it then. I have a thing here. And I'll go over here and I'll say, hey, look, if in fact you have the thing, then I'm going to end up just returning the thing, meaning that I'll have it bounce down to the next then. If not, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to return let's get this to format a little better. Take a look at it, see what I've got here. Let's take a look at it. So we're going to see if we could find 1 where the user ID is the user ID, and if in fact we do end up finding 1, we're going to end up returning it down here. So we'll make it down into this block over here. In any event, when we end up finding our thing here, we're going to have a thing. And we'll go over here and we'll say, hey, look, thing dot quantity plus plus. Return thing dot save. So now we're doing the instance save method, in which case we could go over here and now we end up having our thing, and we'll say response dot send thing, and if we have an error, we'll do a catch and we'll call next. So again, this is a bit of code here. This is probably the most complicated route that we'll end up having. See if you can find the thing. The user has it. If the user has it, good. Return it. Okay, return it, which would end up taking it down here. We're going to update the quantity and we're going to save it. If you don't have it, we're going to create it in any event. Either way, we get a thing back and the quantity gets updated, and then we send the thing back. And again, since the quantity starts at, if we look at our DB, the quantity starts at 0. and we go back over here, we should see that this ends up passing. Let's just make sure of it. Let's go down here. If we go over here and we say we expect to have two things, which we don't, that'll fail. Here we have one thing, and let's actually just take it one step further. Check our quantity. Since these were both foods, we also expect result.body 0, which is our one thing, quantity, to equal 2. And let's see, we've got a parenthesis missing, and I've got this in the wrong spot. Our expectation is that the quantity is going to equal 2. And that works. You always like to go from red to green, so let's say we expect the quantity to be 3. It's going to say you were looking for 3, but you actually got 2. So we go back over here, change this to 2. Let's just add the one more method that we need, is that let's also go in here and we'll say, hey, look, we also have the ability to delete a thing. We don't care. Again, we only have one record. So what do we really want to test out here? What we want to do here is that instead of doing a post, we're going to do a delete. And so we'll go over here and we'll say that we're going to delete. And when we go and delete, we're going to pass in the ID for a foo. So we'll say foo.id. This is we want to basically say we have a thing, one of them is a foo, and we want that quantity to decrease. In fact, if we only have one, we want to end up deleting it. Now let's just take a look and see what happens here. Now if this ends up working, and let's cheat a little bit. And we've got our result here. Now again, we're not even going to get this far because this doesn't end up existing. We'll write that logic here. But if we do that, it's going to say that, well, you got a 404 for that. Let's just see what that logic is going to look like. So if we go to back to our routes, it's going to be a little bit different here. And what we'll end up doing here is, let's copy this. I'm going to cheat a little bit and get rid of some of this stuff. So this is going to be a delete. And in this case, we're going to want to find one. What do we want to find where the user ID is? And here, you can't send data in a delete request. So I'm going to go over here, and this is going to be ID. And so we're going to find one where, in fact, that's actually going to be the product ID. So we'll go over here, and we'll say request params ID is going to be the product ID. And what do we expect to happen here? Well, if in fact we don't have that thing, we've got a problem. We shouldn't have called this in the first place. So we'll go over here and we'll say, if not thing, and we'll just get out of here. We'll say throw, user does not have that thing. Okay, we could make that a little better at some point. But in fact, if we ended up having that thing, what we want to do here is we want to go over here and we want to specify, hey, look, thing.quantity minus return thing.save. And then if we end up going down here, we're going to get back our thing. And we'll say response.send. We'll pass back the thing. And just in case we have an error, we don't want to hang there, we'll say catch next. So we could have an error if the user doesn't have that thing, but let's actually see what happens here. So that ends up passing, okay? And just to add good measure to this, let's just see what happens here. Now, let's go to our spec. And again, we're putting this in one big spec, which is actually, I think, works out pretty well in terms of getting this done. What we're going to do here is let's actually make sure that after we ended up deleting this, that we also expect the quantity to have gone down to 1. And let's see, request.body.0. Oh, I'm sorry, because what we want to do here is that we're going to now want to go and get the things again. And then we're going to go over here. I'm not going to call this, although I am going to call it a little bit later. So we expect, in fact, that, again, we only have one thing here. We've actually tested that already, so that should work. But we expect the quantity to be 1, so this should fail. Let's see. So that fails, and we say, hey, look, we added 1, we deleted 1, we should be back to 1. And just to get this all wrapped up, if we call delete again, we expect 200. And at this point, if we end up calling it one more time, granted, I know that this gets a little bit monotonous here, and we do it then, this will be the last one we do. We have all the routes that we need. We don't expect the body.length to be 1, because now we've actually deleted the 2 that we added, and you'd expect that if you do that, then basically you've deleted that. You don't have any more of those things. There's no point to having a quantity of 0 with the thing. This will pass, but it's not really what we're looking for. We're actually looking for, and in fact, what we could do here is say, hey, look, if you deleted that second thing, we don't expect you to have anything left, which we don't have, but this is a nice, easy fix. What we could do here is if we go to our routes and go down over here, when we go to delete, could actually say, hey, look, if after we end up updating the quantity, we could say if thing.quantity equals 0, return thing destroyed. Get rid of it. Okay? Otherwise, we're going to end up saving it so we don't get rid of it. So if we ended up going down to a quantity of 0, we really have no use anymore for that line item, in which case this ends up passing as well. Again, it's always nice to go from red to green, so if we wanted to do that and we went to our spec over here, we said, hey, look, really we do expect there to still be one thing with a quantity of 0. We see that that ends up failing. We really expect to have no things after that, and that passes. So again, this is a lot of requests that are being made. Just to sort of summarize, we see that we could get the user's thing. We see that we can create a thing for the user. We test, in fact, that that ended up getting added. We end up adding another one. We go to get them again. We realize now we have 2 things. We end up going and we end up deleting one of them. Then we delete another one. And since we deleted both of them, we expect that we don't have any things left after that point, because again, just from the point of view of our database, there's no point to having that record as, again, what could be sort of similar to a line item if in fact there's 0 for the number. And of course, you wouldn't want to have negative numbers. That wouldn't make sense here. So that really does it for sort of testing out these routes. The nice thing about that is that instead of actually testing these things up in Postman, you've got this record. And again, if you end up modifying things and these tests fail, you could figure out why they failed and either fix the test or fix the code.